Hello, I am Anatoly Yakimenko. Do Ukrainians really not want to fight for Ukraine? Recently, Western media outlets have been using open source information about violence during the recruitment of the armed forces of Ukraine in order to put pressure on Ukrainian President Zelensky. Pressure is being exerted by the so-called partners to sign the so-called peace agreement. Interestingly, the same individuals who are outraged by the forced mobilization recommend that the Ukrainian authorities reduce it. The conscription age in Ukraine is from 25 to 18 years. It's also interesting that the critics of violence do not propose alternative methods for ensuring the country's defense capabilities. The undeniable leader in the world condemning the violence in the recruitment of the armed forces of Ukraine is the administration of Donald Trump, in particular the most vulnerable representative is Vice President Vance. Although it must be said, James Vance does not so much condemn as he uses such facts to convince the world that Ukrainians want peace and Zelensky wants war. Because the war allows Zelensky to avoid holding elections and stay in power, there is no point in explaining anything to the Trump administration since they already understand everything very well. But it makes sense to explain to the citizens of the US and others. Ukrainians want to fight for Ukraine, but they have nothing to fight with. The main complaint Ukrainians have against their president is not corruption or violations of justice. During mobilization, the lack of weapons is the main demotivating factor for defending the country. The lack of an adequate amount of weapons seems absolutely mocking and incomprehensible. For the citizens of Ukraine, considering the number and quality of countries that have supported Ukraine, the main complaints about the weapons, of course, are directed at President Zelensky. It was the president of Ukraine who, in the first year of the war, entered into a secret agreement with President Biden to refuse the Lend-Lease. It is President Zelensky who has ineffectively used the financial aid from Western partners and allowed for its embezzlement. It was Zelensky who failed the production of Ukrainian weapons, primarily ballistic and cruise missiles for strikes on Russian territory. The issues with weapons are a result of the behind-the-scenes policies of Western leaders. Ukrainians are very aware of the falsehood of Western support and understand the unofficial ban on the deoccupation of Ukrainian territories. For 3 years, the West has been demanding that Ukrainians conduct a comfortable war with Russia. Whatever it may be, it shouldn't put the Western voter at risk of escalation. It should also be noted that Ukrainians have never heard anything from the West. Critics of the Ukrainian government are talking about the injustice of mobilization and the need to return mandatory military service to the warring country for men aged 18 to 20. The West has never called on Zelensky to abandon shameful practice of segregating men based on their social and property status, and they haven't called on the wealthy to send their children to the front. None of the Western leaders said, replace Zelensky with a better one and we will give you weapons. Instead, we are being told, replace Zelensky with a politician who is convenient for the US, someone who would refuse to fight and sign a capitulation with Russia. And the US will act as a guarantor of peace after this capitulation. The conclusion is very simple. Ukraine is de facto under US sanctions, with a ban on the deoccupation of Ukrainian territories. The more successfully Ukrainians fight, the less weapons are provided to Ukraine. That is, the United States has been demotivating the armed forces of Ukraine for all 3 years of the war to fight. But at the same time, they demand lowering the mobilization age and condemn violence during the staffing of the armed forces of Ukraine. Ukrainians want to and know how to fight. Ukrainians can win. But the Trump administration wants to convince the Ukrainian people that they need to surrender. And if we don't surrender, they won't give us weapons even for defense.